What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the Leigh Dickey TV YouTube channel. I am Leigh Dickey, and welcome back to another episode of the Beats and Speaks podcast. It's been a while since I've either put out a video or done an episode of the Beats and Speaks podcast, and I've gone back to my original setup with the mic on the boom arm and with it going into a mixer via an XLR cable. So let's just hop right into this new episode of the Beats and Speaks podcast. Of course, please comment, like, share, and subscribe. And a reminder, you can get the Beats and Speaks podcast wherever you get your podcasts. iTunes, Apple Podcasts, TuneIn, Android, all the places you can get your podcasts. You can get this one, the Beats and Speaks podcast. You can get it on my official website too as well, leightdickey.com. Go there if you haven't. But get this new episode of the Beats and Speaks podcast wherever you get your podcasts. Alright, with that out of the way and all that housekeeping taken care of, let's get into the bulk of this episode. In this episode, I'm going to take you through my experience with song requests. I've spent about a little more than a decade now in radio and television, and I'm going to give you my experience with song requests. I'm going to tell you what it was like for me from a listener standpoint, because, I mean, much like everybody else, I grew up listening to the radio. This was before the whole iTunes and digital music thing, so the radio was basically where I got my music. I would tape things off the radio via a cassette. I actually still have a working tape deck and an old CD player from like 1994. Yes, the tape deck still works. It's actually a dual tape deck. And I would listen to the radio like religiously even before I got into radio, television, entertainment, broadcasting, that sort of thing. And I would just tape things off the radio, my favorite songs, and there are certain like personality bits, like host bits that I have, and a couple of requests that I've made. I think the one that I remember the most is back from when I was in grade school. So we're looking maybe about 8th grade, 7th or 8th grade. I was crushing on a girl, and long story short, I mean, I'll get to the bulk of the request story and everything, but long story short, I liked her, and it turns out she didn't like me. Okay? Even though I tried my hardest to get her attention, like I would write her little poetry, I would write like lyrics to sort of like ballads in like little letters that I would give her, and my teachers knew, some of my classmates, well, most of my classmates knew, and even the classmates in the room that this girl was in, because she was a year younger than me, because during my 8th grade year, we were actually in portables at the back of my elementary school, because the elementary school that I went to had gone through renovations, or at least they were starting renovations, and the school was getting larger because a couple other elementary schools around my elementary school had shut down due to, I guess, attendance figures and things like that, and I suppose downsizing in the school board. I went to Catholic school from about the 2nd grade all through grade 12, but that's another story for another time. Anyhow, we were in portables during my final year of elementary school, and I had a crush on this girl who was a year younger than me, and like I said, I would write like little poetry, little letters. I would put lyrics to well-known sort of 90s or 80s like R&B ballads into these letters, just to, basically let her know how I felt. And needless to say, it didn't take, right? Like, she wasn't interested. I tried. Back then, I could really sing, so I sang to her a little bit, and it didn't quite work out the way I had hoped. So, also during my final year of elementary school, there was a strike within the Toronto Catholic District School Board, so I was off school for about, I don't know, maybe 4 to 6 weeks, something like that. It was towards the end. I think the board went on strike sometime in late April or early May, and we ended up just being out of school for 4 to 6 weeks while the board and the Teachers Association, I guess, worked out their differences so we could actually get back to school. And I think at that point, that's where I really started to pay attention to the whole school striking thing or the board striking thing, because that was like the end of my elementary school career, and I was moving on to high school, so to be on strike that late into the year kind of worried, I think, me and everybody, because we were like so close to the end that it was like, why go on strike now? Couldn't you just wait until after the school year to basically hammer out your differences? Did you have to do it so close to the end of the year? But that's another story for another time. During this time off, during the strike and me being out of school for 4 to 6 weeks, along with every other person and every other student within the Catholic School Board in Toronto, I would listen to the radio. I just go through a regular day just with no homework and no school, things like that. I would get up. Granted, you spend 4 or 6 weeks just sleeping in for a little while, because, I mean, how often do you get to sleep in when you're, 13, 14 years old without having to go to school? It's just like, it was mind-boggling to me, really, because I'd never been off school that long, basically because of something that wasn't within my control. So I get up when I get up, probably like 9, 10 in the morning, and then I'd listen to the radio most of the day while I just do things around my house. And one day, I guess it was like maybe early afternoon, a couple weeks into the strike, I thought, you know what, because the radio station that I called was, at the time, I think it was a sort of contemporary hit radio, top 40 station, and they would constantly hammer you got a song request? Call this number, yada, yada, yada. And I figured, you know what, like, it's the radio, at the time, I don't work there, I don't control it, I'll just listen to the songs that they have to play. But after hearing you have a request, call this number, blah, 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 over and over again for what seemed like forever, because at that point I really started listening to radio. I'd been really listening to radio for probably about, 2-3 years, and I figured, you know what, why not? We'll give it a shot, and, maybe by pure happenstance, the girl that I happen to be crushing on and wanting to send this song out to will be listening, and maybe things will work out for us. I don't know, maybe she'll, start lavishing some attention on me. Maybe she'll start seeing me in a different light, other than somebody she has to avoid. I don't know, or like that she is wanting to avoid just because she's not interested. I have no clue. But I figured I'd give it a shot. So I called the request line number, and I talked to whoever the host was. I can't remember their name, and I remember the frequency of the station, but I can't remember the host's name. And I think I had told him that I had wanted to request a song for this girl. I was crushing on her pretty hard, and I gave him the song and the artist's name, but it was an older song. It was probably from the 80s. Something, I think it was New Edition, like If It Isn't Love or something like that. I was in a big phase of like New Edition and things like that. It might have been a Michael Jackson song or one of those two. I can't remember exactly, but I'm pretty sure it was either New Edition, like If It Isn't Love, or something by Michael Jackson. I can't remember exactly, but I gave him the name of the song, and he's like, yeah, sure, I'll see if I can get that on for you. And I gave a quick shout out, like, hey, this goes out to so-and-so, I'll see you when we get back to school, and we'll go from there, you know what I mean? Like, we'll pick things up right where we left off, and, we'll be friends and all that. And I left it at that, right? So, it comes up maybe, I don't know, 20, 30 minutes later, and I'm listening to the station, but I knew I gave him the name of a song that was older and probably it didn't fit with the station format at the time. So, you know, he's going to play whatever he's going to play and whatever's coming up on the station playlist because, you know, he's just the host, not the music director, not the program director. He's just playing the songs that are already pre-programmed within the program log. So he says, oh, that's sweet, and blah, blah, blah. Because what happens with requests is they tape that off the air, like your shout-out or whatever, or your song request. They tape that, they record that, and then the host does something called a live cell, which is basically where they talk over the music, and then they stop talking just as the lyrics start, which is what they call hitting the post. If they can get to the intro of the song right before the lyrics hit, that's called hitting the post. And so he played, I gave him the name and artist and the song that I wanted to hear, but I guess it didn't fit with station format because he didn't play that song. And, you know, I'm not knocking it whatsoever. Like I said, I didn't work at the station. I had no control over what music they would play. And I just wanted to give a shout out to this girl that I was crushing on. So he ended up playing, like, he says, oh, well, that's so sweet. This is for you and the girl in question. So he played Mariah Carey's Always Be My Baby, you know? And I think I might still have the cassette around here somewhere with my shout out and intact, the whole thing. I'm not sure, I'd have to try and find it, but I can never listen to that specific song, Mariah Carey's Always Be My Baby, anymore without going right back to that particular day. And I think about May or June of 2003, and basically thinking of that shout out and request that I had made on the radio, and basically called up the request line and told the host a bit about me and this girl and whatever, what have you. But I can't think of Mariah Carey's Always Be My Baby without going right back to that particular day in, like, grade school and just hearing my voice on the radio as a listener and getting to give a shout out and request and that sort of thing, which will always be a cool little thing in my book. That'll always be something that I will take with me wherever I go. That's something that I will hold on to. Now, that's the positive side to this whole story. Needless to say, the request, you know, it didn't get her attention. I think she just withdrew from me a little more. Cause, I mean, she wasn't interested, right? Which, whatever. If she's not interested, she's not interested. And I can say that now. If you're not interested in me, you're not interested in me. Whatever. Move on. So, it didn't work out the way I had hoped. But I will always have that shout out and that time period and that request. And if I can find the tape, fantastic. But I'll always remember that for as long as I live. That's probably one of the cooler moments I've had as a listener and a fan of radio, even before I got into radio and television, that sort of thing. Now, I'm going to also tell you a bit of the downside to requests. I remember I was at a babysitter's place at one point. This was probably, I'd say, 2001, so I would have been like 11 or 12. And we would listen to the radio because, like, they had radios and cassettes and records and things like that from, like, the 70s and the 80s, because they were all a bit older than me. And this particular babysitter that I had she's not that much older. She wasn't that much older than me. She's probably about, I'd say, 7 or 8 years older than me. And I can say this. I mean, at 12, I was more mature than she was at about 19 or 20, which kind of scared me, because, I mean, if that's what the maturity level was like, with her. I'm not sure it gave me a good leg up or a good threshold or foundation when it came to actually dealing with people outside of her and everybody else really that she came in contact with. Don't get me wrong, she's a sweet woman and all, but it didn't really set a good example, I suppose, because she would have me call. I was like 11 or 12 at the time, so I was a kid, right? And she would have me call the station to request her songs, and I suppose she was using me because I was a kid, and she figured that the stations were more inclined to play the songs that I had requested them because I was so young. I was like 11, 12, and she was like 19, 20. So I don't know. Maybe that was her thought process. I'm not sure. But anyhow, she had requested, I remember this, she had requested an NSYNC song. You guys remember NSYNC? Like Justin Timberlake, Chris Kirkpatrick, Joey Fatone, Lance Bass, and J.C. Chazé, that 90s pop group that was basically the answer to Backstreet Boys, or at least, I don't want to say the rival group to the Backstreet Boys, but you get the idea. They were just another five-man or five-member boy band. And she had me call up the station, call the number, because we were listening to the station, so I called the request line and requested an NSYNC song. So I think the song came off their, I can't remember which album it was. I think it might have been their debut, or it might have been their follow-up. I can't remember the name of the song or the name of the album, but she had me call up the station, and they were still playing like NSYNC fell into the station's sort of music selection. It fell into the format, basically. NSYNC did fall into the station's format, and they were playing an NSYNC song when I finally got through. It took a little while, maybe like 30 minutes to an hour. I'm not kidding, I kept trying because she basically kept wanting me to, even though I didn't want to do it, but, not my house, and she's my sitter, so I'm just doing what I'm told, right? And I am sitting on the other end of this line the entire time thinking, I don't want to do this, this is not my problem, and I'm only doing this because I'm basically being told to do this, because she's about to throw a fit and a tantrum because she's not getting her song played, so it's best if I do it because she's going to break down and bawl at any minute, and it's really not something I want to deal with, and it's not something I really should have dealt with at my age at that time. So I'm on the phone, and, busy signal, you try again. Busy signal, you try again. 30 minutes to an hour. I finally get through to, I think it's the receptionist. Well, it might have been, because it was, I guess, the woman on the other end. Name of the station, hi, how can I help you? It was probably the receptionist, anyhow. And I just remember thinking, like, I don't want to, I really don't want to be on the other end of this line, but I am on the other end of this line. And I basically had to explain to this woman, who I had no idea who she was, just the receptionist, she just worked there, she's just doing her job, and I don't even want to be the guy that's on the other, I don't want to be the bad guy, right? Because it's not my problem. You understand what I mean? So I'm just explaining to her, like, my sitter and I are listening to the station, and, she's requested a song, it's by NSYNC, and we're just wondering if we can get that played, and yada, yada, yada. And the receptionist is like, well, we're playing an NSYNC song now, is that okay? And I look at my sitter, and she's upset. It looks like she's about to throw a tantrum, and like I said before, the maturity level scared me. If I was the younger one and I was trying to be more mature on the phone, while a 19, 20-year-old woman was about to throw a tantrum because she didn't get her song played on the radio, even though they were playing a song by the group that she had requested, I couldn't wait to get out of there that afternoon, let's just put it that way, because I just didn't want to deal with it. And I didn't want to be the bad guy. Needless to say, I don't know whether or not the song ever did get played, but I don't know. After I got off the phone with the receptionist, why aren't they playing it? I'm like, listen, and I kept my mouth shut, basically, because there's nothing I can say at this point that will make her feel any better. Even though I didn't want to make the phone call to the station in the first place, I didn't want to be on the other end of that line because it wasn't my problem. I didn't want the song played. I didn't care. It was just, we're listening to the radio, and that's it. You know what I'm saying? Like, we didn't work at the station. We don't have any control over the music they play. Let's just enjoy it. But no, she just got upset. She got super upset because they weren't playing the song that she wanted. And I just thought, oh, I can't wait to get out of here, right? Because I just didn't want to deal with it. I mean, I really shouldn't have had to deal with it at that time at my age, because, I mean, that's not my problem. I'm more worried at that time just being a kid and trying to enjoy my youth, but I'm stuck with a babysitter that's throwing a tantrum because she didn't get her song played on the radio. I don't know, that's one of the downsides, I suppose, of, requesting songs on the radio. If they don't play your song, okay, well then try again the next day, man. In a way, I kind of resented going to the sitter for that. It was always something. Like, every weekend I'd go over, because both my parents worked, and I had always just, like, they were, most of the time they were great, and I was lucky to find them. My parents were lucky to find them, but it was like, man, I just want to enjoy my youth, not have to come to a sitter every week and have to deal with certain things that are beyond my control, being the age that I was at the time. But those were a couple song request stories from the listener point of view in me. And I hope you guys enjoyed this episode of the Beats and Speaks podcast. Perhaps I'll get to another song request episode, or I'll put another episode of the Beats and Speaks podcast out where I speak on the other side of taking requests as a producer, host, radio station employee. Maybe we'll get to that at some point. But those are just a couple stories from the listener side of taking making song requests to a radio station from yours truly, Leigh Dickey. Thanks again for tuning in to Leigh Dickey TV, the Beats and Speaks podcast. Please comment, like, share, and subscribe. You can find the Beats and Speaks podcast wherever you get your podcast: iTunes, Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, TuneIn, Android. Anywhere you can get your podcast, the Beats and Speaks podcast is available. It's also available on my official website, LeighTDickey.com, and the Leigh Dickey TV YouTube channel. Alright, everybody. Thanks again for tuning in. I've been Leigh Dickey. This has been another episode of the Beats and Speaks podcast. Please comment, like, share, and subscribe. And, of course, as always, we will see you in the next one. Alright, Leigh Dickey, signing off. Peace.